Hi, I'm Jake Grez, also known as Nurse Jake. As a travel nurse, I've worked in all kinds of places, different settings, cities, and climates. Every assignment brings on a new challenge, which is why I always bring my figs. These scrubs are built for whatever the job throws at you. They're breathable, flexible, and comfortable in any environment. No matter where I land, I know they're going to keep me looking and feeling my best. And don't sleep on the details. The pockets, the features, the finishing touches, everything has a purpose, and it makes a real difference when you're moving nonstop. The fit is clean, tailored, and super polished, and they come in a huge range of colors. In other words, they feel great throughout a 12-hour shift, and they always look good. See every healthcare professional on Instagram. If you work in healthcare or know someone who does, check out Figs and get 15% off your first order at wearfigs.com with code FIGSRX. That's wearfigs.com, code FIGSRX.
Hey there, and welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast. We're fueled by the incredible clients who inspire us every day, allowing us to elevate their health and fitness journeys. On this show, you'll gain valuable insights from top professionals, hear inspiring transformation stories, and discover the knowledge and motivation to create your own best life. Let's dive in. As someone who has continuously used therapy as a way to heal and elevate my personal performance, I know wholeheartedly that you cannot always read the label when you're in the jar. And that's why it's so helpful to have a professional in your corner to talk to. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp to provide our listeners with the opportunity to work with a licensed therapist from the comfort of your own home. Receive 10% off your first month when you sign up by going to betterhelp.com/TFL. That's betterhelp.com/T as in think, F as in fitness, L as in life. And remember, you're not alone. There are people out there who can help.
All right, welcome back to the Think Fitness Life podcast. And as many people has listened to me in the past, I'm big into the Olympic lifting world and the strength training world. And I've had a few other Olympic coaches on and talked about this. But recently, and in over a couple of years, going to Summer Strong, I've met people that really align with how I want to coach and how I want to train. And one of those is actually my Olympic lifting coach, known as Mongo, or Stephen Powell. So we're going to bring him on for experience, life lessons, what he's learned, how he coaches. And we're also going to dive into some stuff that we've seen online that athletes are doing and people are doing that we think is just kind of dumb in the realms of sport training. Stephen, welcome on.
Thank you for having me.
Give us a little background, because I've gotten a little bit, but where did you get started in this world of strength training, Olympic weightlifting? Give a little background.
When I was in the 4th or 5th grade, I heard Paul Anderson speak at a summer camp I was attending. And those who are not familiar with Paul Anderson, he's the last American male to be Olympic champion, which was in 1956. And he had a very short career because they had very strict amateur codes back then. And shortly after winning the Olympics, he opened up a youth home for at-risk youth with his wife and began to raise money for that as best he could. Arguably the strongest man in history, first man to officially clean and press 400 pounds. And I'm talking when the press was a press.
Wow.
Okay, not the 70s press you'll actually do, and that's impressive in and of himself. But we're talking a very strict press. And he was on the Ed Sullivan show, and there is some debate about what he really squatted, but I've been to his youth home twice. I've seen the old bars he used to train with, the old tractor wheels he used to train with, and there's a video of him squatting at least 1,000 pounds in street clothes without him. It's on the biography about him that the founder of Powerlifting USA did. Mike Lambert. I think his name is Mike Lambert. And it's on YouTube. I saw him, sorry. So And my dad bought his first biography, which I read, and then I begged my dad to get me a weight set for my room, and he was like, if you earn half the money, then I'll pay for half of it. And my loved ones for a whole summer and got a weight set, and I had no idea what I was doing, and broke my arm and could have seriously hurt myself. But that really began the journey for me.
And as you go, really, that kind of, I feel like that a lot of times that kind of what gets a lot of our younger athletes, even myself, involved when we see people have these feats of strength at a young age. You're like, how do you emulate that? Going further in, when did you start to get used to really the Olympic lifting training side of things?
Yeah, when I first really started training, I just wanted to do exercises that would give a bigger guy like myself some size. Like most of the stuff I did was devoted to like chest and arms and stuff. I had tried to do some of the Olympic lifts in my room with the old concrete filled plastic molds and no oscillation on the bar whatsoever, and that's all I ended up breaking my wrist. But eventually I joined a place called Irmo Sports Gym, which coincidentally Sorenix got started in there. Richard Soren would lease a side place, a side office, and he made all the equipment for this gym. And this was late 80s, early 90s when I joined. And a lot of big people would come through, Slayer, Arn Anderson, the Four Horsemen, when wrestling still had events that weren't televised, and there was still territories other than WWE. A lot of wrestlers would come and train at this gym. Dale Wilkes, the Patriot, trained there frequently as he was from Columbia. And you just saw a lot of really strong guys come through the gym, and they had a platform in upper plates in the week of equipment. Eventually, after I saw the 92 Olympics, and it really reignited my desire to really learn weightlifting, I tried to teach myself and fiddle for a long time. And this big, tall guy, about 6'5", very imposing, it would come out in this office. I didn't know who Richard was at the time, but he would come out and just watch me and look amused, and he would train himself, and this went on for months. And eventually he found out I wasn't going to quit. And eventually one day he just came up to me and said, okay, I'm tired of watching you fall down. I want to teach you how to do this. You'll be safe and you'll just learn properly. And he walked me through his progressions, snatch balances and overhead positions, and started writing me workouts, and he walked me through every exercise, and when he could, he would come out and actually watch me while he would train himself, and that's really where it began.
And after that, where did you go for kind of the furthering of the Olympic lifting?
When I got into coaching, when the writing was on the wall, I was not going to meet my goals of being a very good weightlifter, being a world and Olympic champion, and things like that. I just found over the years, as I was still pursuing it, that I had a knack for teaching it to other people and explaining it to other people in a way that made sense to them. Would teach other people that Richard was working the power clean and things like that. And then when I really started getting into coaching around 1999, 2000, Richard got me into coaching. There was this young teenager named Jenna Buzzard. And I heard that she was kicked off the JV team at her high school because she was hurting the guys. One day she came in when I first met her, and she met Richard, she met myself, walked her through some things. And I had her squat at first, and I looked at her mobility, walked her through some things. And it was really lightweight, and we started with the bar at 135, then 225, then 275, thinking at some point this was going to look heavy, and it never did. I think we may have gone up to 275, maybe 315. Moved on to deadlift, moved on to bench, and then we moved to the dumbbell rack, and she shouldered a pair of 75-pound dumbbells that we were impressing. And me and Pounce were just looking at each other, shaking our heads like, what is going on here? Soradex was really taking off into another chapter, and Bert had joined working for his dad. He had graduated from college. He was still throwing pretty seriously. But Richard didn't really have time to coach anyone anymore. He entrusted that with me. And then in a year, Jenna won the state, national, world championship in powerlifting. That's what she actually lifted compared to the numerous other, the 50 or other powerlifting organizations that existed at the time around the world. But I looked at her lifts, ranked, and they were the highest of any 15 or 16-year-old in the world, regardless of what organization it was.
Wow, that's impressive. And what was her training? Was she doing 3-4 days a week?
3 to 4 days a week. You had to drive about 30 minutes from a town called Lugoff to come train with me. And she couldn't drive yet. Her mom had a full-time job. Her dad had a full-time job, but her mom decided to go to part-time to help Jenna train. And she would drive Jenna at least 3 times a week. And then when Jenna could drive, sometimes it was 4 times a week. When she started weightlifting, it started to be 4 times a week.
Did you really start with powerlifting, or powerlifters more than Olympic weightlifting?
I started Jenna at powerlifting.
Yeah.
Powerlifting is what she wanted to do at first. And I took what I knew of linear and nonlinear periodization and just applied it to her, also with room for how she felt on any given day. But her lifts just, once she started playing football and just focused on lifting, her lifts really went through the roof. And for the world championship, it was either, I think in 2000, she squatted 505. And it went as deep as her thighs let her go. And she deadlifted around 200 kilos and bench pressed around 120. And officially, all she needed to do was 210 kilos, which she did very easily. 92.5 or 195, I can't remember. And bench pressed something like 115. And there are some photos of these lifts that Pops took that are in Dale Harder Strength and Speed journals. And there are some photos on my Instagram as well of those lifts. That's where I got started. And then eventually, I thought she had good speed and mobility for weightlifting, but what do I know? I wanted to get a second opinion. I went down to Savannah, Georgia to meet Don McCauley. And I had no idea that I would meet Coach Kane, the former head coach of South Korea, but Coach Kane was living in Savannah at the time. And I had talked to Don on the phone before we went down and just said, hey, my name is I've a world champion powerlifter here who's best lifter this. And he was like, what is she squatting? How old is she? 15. It was just like he couldn't believe it. I told her, I'm like, at least during this, you have a few months off from serious powerlifting. Let's just work on being more mobile and explosive. Let's work in the Olympic lifts a little bit into your training, which we did. She had fun with it. And I thought she had potential. So when we went down to Savannah, Don and Coach Kane and every coach there, and at the time, the head coach of the national women's team was there. And everyone just looked at her and looked at her raw potential, and they all agreed that she had tremendous potential. So we had to talk with her and said, I think that you may be able to have Olympic ability. And at the very least, as a junior, I think you'll make some junior Pan Am teams, junior world teams, which she did. And you'll be able to travel the world and see things that if you are in powerlifting, you would largely have to finance yourself.
When you got introduced to the South Korean coach, was that really what solidified your kind of background of kind of style of Olympic lifting?
Yeah, he was a very good lifter himself. He won medals in the Asian Championships, and he studied for years in the former Soviet Union under the greatest people you could imagine. They paid a lot of money for him to go learn from Verkhoshansky, from Robert Vermont, and a slew of other people. He came back and he used a lot of their principles to develop the lifting system in South Korea and coincidentally Japan.
Yeah. And that's one thing we've talked about and I've always had questions on is I grew up more in the USAW weightlifting style from my coaches in college. And then it's now flipped to more of that Russian style because of what we've talked about. Let's talk about the difference between the two. Cause I think there's a big staunch, we've talked about this off air of, hey, different styles and different coaches and what some of the US do versus what the old Soviet system really had it locked down. And a lot of the manuals that you've shared and we read is like, they understood it. And then we had coaches here maybe change it and write their own kind of thoughts.
Yeah, Coach K had all of these charts and graphs and everything down to a T. You should power snatch and power clean a certain percentage of your full clean. Your back squat, depending on weight class, should be, like if you're a super heavyweight and you want to clean and jerk 200 kilos, then that by minimum, you would need to back squat 130 to 135% of 200 kilos. And they begged him to let me copy him, to let me borrow some of it, but he wouldn't. Again, all of the manuals, they're but Charniga translated. A whole lot of published works at Robert Vermont. And a multi-year system of training by Medvedev, and having those things explained to me by a coach. He had produced Olympic and world champions himself. It was really an eye-opener. What we see in the manuals in the United States now compared to where they were 20 some odd years ago, they've improved quite a bit. They can improve quite a bit more. For example, the diet recommendations are terrible. The Russians and Bulgarians, for that matter, eat more of a high-fat, high-protein diet. And there is an excellent video released by a YouTube page called Strength School that just talked about this. Buckwheat, kefir, cheese, like cottage cheese, and fatty meat were a staple of their diet. 200 grams of serving minimum of fatty meat plus other grams of other kinds of meat. But and it explains exactly why, and it's true. If you eat chicken breasts and vegetables and think you're going to be a good weightlifter, you're not going to recover. Just simply put, you need fat and cholesterol. Is the engine of testosterone. It really what it produces testosterone in men and more estrogen in women in recovery. And it does. The way that your body will break down and use protein to repair tissue is highly dependent upon the amount of fat you can sell. If you're consuming a high protein, low fat diet, you're wasting a lot of food. You can be very lean and stay lean and lose body weight or mass or make weight or cut weight for a meat and follow this diet. The portions will be smaller. But that's one thing you still see. And as we recommend a low fat, high protein diet. Why when there's a number of sources out there from many other good coaches of why this isn't great, why it's not. And another thing is, not long ago, most coaches were teaching the top-down method, which is a way to begin. It is a way to begin, but in the CSCS and SCA and USA, that would be, hey, we just teach the top-down. We teach the high hang, then the hang below the knees, and then go from the floor. And that's not what I would say. And that's not what you read in the manuals. It's one way to do it, but in many of the videos released that are on, it looked like they were filmed in the 50s, but they really were filmed in the mid to late 80s. But teaching lifters from the floor how to set it properly how to initiate movement from the floor, how to get into the optimal setup position to use the legs to push when you initiate the lift. And that's really where they start everybody. If you look at a multi-year of training, that's where evidence starts. People have some kind of mobility problems or issues. Okay, then we can do the same thing from low blocks. We can teach people how to forcibly thrust the quads, what they call debrief in Russian. It's how to forcefully thrust the quads. Where they want people to know what they want, regardless of age, but especially kids, is how powerful and forceful the legs are. And not just jumping up with your own body and jumping on top of things or over things, but producing force into a barbell, into an implement like that. That's where they do. They primarily teach lifters and athletes how to set up from the floor, how to do some kind of pull with a leg drive, and then they'll do snatches on plates or plunks. These like square boxes. Alexei Cheraki has videos on them. Dmitry Klokov, even Lydia Valentin Perez demonstrated this when she came to the Arnold some years ago. It's just placing your feet between plates, and they would be narrower than they normally would be if you were just lifting from the floor. But as you extend and receive a snatch, you snap your feet up on the plates. There's no wasted movement. It teaches you to be efficient, to stay ahead of the barbell. And that's really what they emphasize is one, the role of the legs, and two, you've got to get low fast. You've got to stay at the head of the barbell and keep getting faster. They emphasize those two things almost simultaneously. And here in the U.S., there's just still an emphasis on extension and staying in extension. And however you want to call it, I don't have a problem with the term triple extension like I used to. It really just depends on what you mean by it. There are coaches that teach triple extension that are great coaches. They produce great athletes, but they also emphasize getting low fast. But I never heard Coach King use triple extension or Zygmunt, and neither Paul Koffer. I've had very good conversations with Paul Koffer, and he was like, I don't really know what you mean by that. I say extension. I want your legs generating force, and I want you staying ahead of the barbell.
Yeah, that was a big one when I was going through undergrad and grad. It was always the triple extension emphasis. And when I would go to lift, and you saw this when my first kind of approach on lifting, I was really focused on trying to drive triple extension, like hips, toes, shrug. And that was a limiting factor because I wasn't really using my quads. And how many people are getting triple extension, but they're not actually using the quads?
It's like a glorified calf raise. And it's not like when a lifter does maximum attempts, most lifters do some kind of triple extension, but it's not to produce force. It's transitioning the body to actually go under the barbell. Zhukov is huge on this. When does the barbell reach maximum speed? Before you reach full extension. By the time you reach full extension, it takes almost 1/10 of a second to reach extension for a world-class lifter. About 0.13 seconds for a maximum cleanup, but that is about as fast as a voluntary idle leg. If you teach triple extension in the sense that there is forceful extension through the top, you're really teaching them to over-extend and over-pull. And there's a good guy named Gabriel Simprin from Romania who has a whole video about it, and he shows Yuri Zakharevich. There are some lifters, Keki Kakashvili, Oleg Perepechnos, that really, they hardly plant or flex at all when they lifted. Depending on body type, and if someone, the lighter body weight category lifters that have small feet, they might have more feet, more surface area on the forefoot, and they might need to forcefully drive up on the toes to punch their quads. But that's the aim, is to get the most out of their quads.
And once you get the quads, like I even notice now, it's like the quads drive everything. Everything else is reaction.
One quote I've told you, and I asked many other coaches, what's the greatest skill required for weightlifting? According to Robert Ramon, he was an absolute genius in biomechanics, considered a biomechanist extraordinaire, worked with I don't know how many champions, not just in weightlifting, but other sports. But he said the greatest skill required for weightlifting is to get as low as possible, as fast as possible. And I'm not smart enough to come up with it.
Mm.
And saying that, the emphasis should be when teaching a beginner or anybody how to get the most out of your legs to generate force, but also how to get back down, how to get down quickly.
That's a big one because the top-down model really emphasizes the power, and nothing wrong with the power position, but I got used to catching power, catching up tall, that it was foreign for me once I started pulling from the floor and had to pull under fast. The timing was just not there.
And it takes practice. It's a skill. It takes practice just like anything, but I want anybody that I work with, regardless of experience, I want as little conscious thought going into what you're doing. But I just tell people, if you push with the legs until the bar goes up, you will go down. It is more of a reaction than a forceful action. You have built up so much kinetic energy. Once you reach extension, there's nowhere else to go. But the brain knows this. And some people, hey, you need to shrug under, Chinese some shrug. They don't teach. I don't care what you can watch numerous videos of them lifting, and there is some by Lou Jiajun Barbell that have mentioned this, maybe Coach Ma with Ma Strength, but they have several videos and it'll read describing why they don't use the traps or shrug through the top of extension anyway.
Yeah, that's one in my old programs in years ago. I'd always have power shrugs or pulls with shrugs, and you don't have that in there for me. And we also talked about this in our group chat about the pull unders. The internet's got a lot of stuff. And before we started working together, I was trying to basically get all this information through a water hose on full blast. But realizing there's so many different styles, and to watch one coach teach it like one way, one coach the other, but one of the coaches was like, oh, you have to pull under. And when I would do that, it would cause problems for me, because then I would just feel like the bar is crashing down. And we got in this big conversation that it's not a pull under. It's a big difference, because you still hear other coaches be like, hey, you have to pull yourself under the bar. And they emphasize that. Which, if it works for them, it works for them. But it just doesn't make sense from what we've talked about. It doesn't make sense, like biomechanically, how it should happen. You shouldn't try to do these things within the lift or hyper focus on them.
Yeah, it's still there. There is, especially in strength coaching, there are some, what a D1 strength coach or a pro strength coach has to do in totality that do implement Olympic lifts. I even see a lot of this still in a lot of D1 and pro sports, where there's just an overemphasis of staying in extension. The reason or the excuse, hey, we're not weightlifters, that's fine. I know that. Any reasonable weightlifting coach will know that. But if you can improve a couple of small things technically here and there, you will not only produce more force in less time, you will also be much safer.
Right.
If you can improve performance by 5 to 10% simply by making a couple of technical adjustments and shifting the focus a little bit, what do you have to lose? You're trying to build athleticism through a variation of the Olympic lift. Maybe hire a weightlifting coach to come look at your athletes, look at how you do power cleans, and offer some suggestions, because I still see a lot of players with their feet way too close together. The bar is still way out in front of them. They're working hard just to get the bar moving, that by the time they do extend and use their legs to the degree they do, the bar is crashing. And they're headed for potential injury. And that's not what I like to see.
Yeah. And that's a big thing, because even when at the conference, you were pointing stuff out, helping me be a better coach of other like athletes and coaches doing stuff that necessarily you would be like, hey, this is just not safe or not applicable for the outcome that they're looking for. And the main thing in the Olympic lifts is like force production.
And the argument that some coaches use that, okay, it's too complicated. Then how do you explain how there are so many kids, 6, 7, 8 years old, sometimes younger, who learn these movements and learn them rather quickly? It's easy a kid can do it. And I have videos on my Instagram of me working with a 10-year-old named Wilson. And I didn't work with him for very long, maybe a month, but I have his very first session. And he's doing a very decent, good power clean with 30 kilos on a 10-kilo children's bar. And me also working with Cole, another kid named Cole, who was 9 at the time. And he did some lifting north and injured his elbow in football. And his orthopedic surgeon said, you need to do some weightlifting to strengthen your joints. This is an orthopedic surgeon saying you need to lift, and no, you don't find growth with proper weight training for a kid.
And one big thing you may agree is people get eager to throw weights on a bar instead of mastering the technique first. And then the reps start to become sloppy, and they're just figuring out how to move that bar into a position where they can receive it. And
right. And again, to quote Robert Ramon, this should be in every weightlifting existence, not just in USA weightlifting. But Robert Ramon said, in weightlifting, technique is the expression of strength. How important is technique? Have you ever seen a world champion, Olympic champion weightlifter with bad technique? No, they don't exist. They might have technique that's unconventional or different to you. Some may bend their arms in a way that you think, or some armchair coach thinks is bad, but they're the champion for a reason. That it's easy to harp on a couple of basic athletes. Keep the bar close, get in a set of position to optimally use your legs. That when you receive the bar, you're staying on your quads and using your quads to brace and support the weight. If you're partitioning wide, your quads can't hit the brakes, and you're just headed for a disaster.
Yep. And we've seen it happen, and you see, you don't develop good athletes and they go on the field and they don't have motor patterns. It's a problem. And we were talking about this because I sent you something that I saw online that was like ridiculous. And you said idiotic, and I agree. We were talking about like great athletes master the basics we're talking about, but then some coaches, they're just not really doing strength and conditioning. They're not. And let's dive into that, because we see people doing, and the video was a single leg barbell clean. Like, I don't know what transfer someone's getting besides just, hey, why don't you do a double leg clean? Because you could do a different variation or something single leg. But what do you think we're getting into these realms of trying to reinvent the Olympic lifts?
I think just some people are trying to make themselves just seem smarter than they are. And single leg cleans, I don't know. A sprinter, a high jumper, long jumper, thrower, pole vaulter, when they use variations of the Olympic lifts, it is to improve neuromuscular coordination, that they can produce force quickly. They are training the nervous system, and not just really the nervous system. You're training and creating neural impulses to fire. You're training the brain to send a signal to muscles through nerves to fire. It's taking every major muscle group you have in your body and synchronizing up to do a very coordinated, complicated task. A sprinter like Noah Lyles, who power cleans 137, or Horace Grant, who power clean like 305 from WODs, they're not doing them because these movements lie functionally with their sport. Bilateral, unilateral, who cares? They're doing it to improve neuromuscular coordination, to make them better athletes. to give them better spatial awareness, proprioception awareness, and to be quicker and more explosive when you see an opportunity to get a rebound, or to be more explosive out of the blocks if you're a sprinter, or to be more explosive through the finish, through the finish of a sprint, to be able to move through linear and lateral planes of motion quickly, to make decisions at high speeds. That's what these teach. And it's like what David Ballou said at the beginning of his talk. You have less than half a second before my defense comes and hits you in the mouth.
No.
You're not training for power and acceleration. What are you doing? What are you doing? And if you want to think or believe that jumping trap bar deadlifts produce the same amount of force as a power clean, no.
I've seen that one. That one's a lot. People will, if they're not comfortable coaching the clean, or they're not competent, or they just say, hey, I don't want to do this because of whatever injury or risk. And then they the same as a trap bar jump. It's not really, no.
I have much more respect for a coach who goes, of all the things that I've got to do in the weight room, I mean, to sort of safety, we just do pulls, or we just do ballistic work another way. Okay, great. I'm not going to persuade you in a 10-minute conversation to do anything else. Okay. He's just being flat out honest, rather than someone just go, they're either worthless or pointless or too different, take too much time. You don't have taught quite a few athletes how to do very good technical lifts in a very limited amount of time. One example is Jacob August. He was the former tight end from the University of South Carolina. He's 6'6". In cleats, he's probably 6'8". Weightlifting shoes, he's 6'8". And he was more of a blocking tight end. He scored, I think, 2 touchdowns in his entire career. But he was a very good, very quick athlete, not the strongest on the team. And I have several videos of doing power cleans with me, is doing probably staying between 110 and 120 kilos, and he's doing some snatches with 85%. He's moving very well. And he knew that if he wanted to go to the pros, which he didn't, and I'm glad he didn't go, but he knew that the next level for him, he wasn't going to be a big back squatter and a big bencher because of his build, but we could fine tune his nervous system a little bit.
Yeah, and then coaches they're creating these variations to, I think they're in their head, they're trying to fine tune the nervous system, but the coordination, like the single leg clean, it's just not, you're going to have your limitations. And the whole technique is actually just different because you have one leg in the air. It's not a clean at all.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I don't know who espouses that or who teaches that. Single leg cleans there with a barbell. Okay, maybe use a kettlebell, use a dumbbell. And there are different ways to teach people pro agility and how to jump and how to land and things like that. But I've never seen a video of any Russian athlete or old Soviet Union athlete do power cleans on one way. And there are a lot of videos of wrestlers doing power cleans or power snatches, sprinters, hurdlers, throwers, you name it. They were doing the single leg hops up a hill, developing neural impulses, doing what you'll see in any good D1 or pro team in terms of their agility and their conditioning. Yeah, they're going to be doing that on turf and building athleticism that way. But again, I think to your point quite some time ago, is too many coaches today confuse strength and conditioning with conditioning and more conditioning. Where is the basic strength movements? Where are the squats? Where are the deadlifts or pulls? Where's the posterior chain development coming from? What do you do? Where are the basics that you need to master first? I don't care how many wobbly boards you get out and single leg hop stuff. To an extent, like David Ballou's point was, and Dan Pfaff's point was, we got to learn to produce force quickly. And you got to be strong to do that. Have you ever heard of a weak powerful person, they don't exist. They don't exist. Yeah, strength is important. Should it be at the expense of producing force quickly? No. You need to get strong to be able to produce force quickly. Let's do those basics. And again, every single great athlete is an athlete that mastered the basics and was good at the very few basic things. They were masters of a dozen complicated stuff like the single leg clean.
Yeah, nowadays with like Instagram and people they've taken from the Soviets and that those models to make it look functional. I'm going to use functional to make it look flashy or complex. Yeah, we are a complex human, but when you don't teach basics first, people don't develop that neuromuscular coordination and allow the system to understand how it's going to move, have foundations. Then you do all this other stuff. Someone's going to reach a ceiling, or then they take all this. A lot of it's the Soviet stuff, and they take it and they say, "Oh, this stuff was they were either on drugs, but it doesn't matter. They were still doing it, or there's a high risk of injury here." With some of these movements, like the back squat, the clean, the snatch, if I'm heard for coaches, we do different variations that aren't as injury prone, but you're also you're taking away athletic ability and force production. You're robbing the system because you're afraid of, I don't know if injury is an excuse, or you just don't, your method's not coaching them, you don't want to, but it's why we know it works. We've seen the Soviet system work, the running, the jumping, and it wasn't only lifters. Their athletes were doing all that stuff.
Have you been on that journey to look for that supplement? Nothing too extreme. The one you're looking for that gets the job done and you actually feel it. Well, I have that supplement for you. It's Recommend, Man Formula, Lady Formula, and Clear Focus. Only 3 supplements this company has. And that's all you need, whether you're going to stack them. My favorite's the stacked. Man Formula plus Clear Focus. If you're a female, Lady Formula, Clear Focus. My squats have not been better. My lifts have not gone better. I feel stamina, energy, endurance during the lift. I feel great recovery-wise. Throughout the day, I have energy and focus. My brain feels good. My central nervous system is turned on. And most important, sexual function. When I tell you that it packs a punch and gives you what you need from a man's perspective, it enhances hormones. It optimizes my mitochondria. And you know what? It gives me the drive and libido that I could never complain about. Plus all the other performance things. That is this supplement. Recommend supplements putting the cleanest ingredients in their products to be the optimal stop for overall health, performance, hormones, you name it. It's got stuff like Tonkat Ali in there for strength. It's got L-arginine for blood flow performance. Stuff you don't even think about. Then the Clear Focus, we're talking nootropics through and through. Brain health, optimizing focus, clarity. Screw those energy drinks. Screw multiple cups of coffee. My morning routine, I have 1 cup of coffee. I put Clear Focus and I take my Man Formula. I stack them together and my day is on. And you can take advantage and get on the same regimen. Check out recommend.com. Use code TFL20 for 20% off and get control. Take advantage of your health today.
I'm a big fan of MMA, big fan of the Dagestan grapplers, Habib Nurmagomedov, and his father, who's passed away during COVID. And Islam Makhachev is now the welterweight champion, training to fight next month. And the videos of his weightlifting, again, what he's doing for conditioning and weight training it's basic, but it is brutal. Brutal. And then, of course, the grappling, the time they spent actually striking and grappling and things like that. It makes me really so sorry for their opponents. But it's just a system of conditioning that is no nonsense. We're going to sprint up hills with rocks and throw the rocks down, sprint down the hill, pick the rock back up, sprint up the hill. Then we're going to go to another station and do something, conditioning, wrestle the bear, whatever. But it's basic, but it is actually brutal to its core and effective.
I think that you were talking about like some of the conditioning that the Russians in the Soviets or Eastern Bloc would do is just, it's basic, but it gets the job done. It's nothing complex.
But there's a reason Pavel Tsatsouline trained the Spetsnaz in the Soviet Union, the Special Forces, and why he trains the Navy SEALs and the Green Berets. Cobras. You don't start moving. No. He never does more than 5 reps in a movement except for the kettlebell swing. But the tactical get up, the Turkish get up, the kettlebell clean and press, the kettlebell snatch, and all of these different, the kettlebell lateral swing, side swing, the reverse lunge, the lateral lunge, the forward lunge, you switch back and forth and you don't start moving. You don't overly tax one specific muscle group, but you don't start moving. That's why it's effective. Yeah. And his father were masters of sport and weightlifting as well. Pavel gives a great 20-minute talk on the Joe Rogan podcast about 4 or 5 years ago of why the Soviet weightlifting method was effective.
I think people think the Soviet weightlifting, they just think, oh, they just lifted weights and did drugs, but it's not the case. And that's where people get like, they just throw it out. They're like, oh, that's an anomaly.
Why does everyone else copy?
I know.
We wouldn't know what periodization was, but we wouldn't know what bodily energy systems were, what different muscle types there are between slow twitch, fast twitch. We wouldn't know between Hansoye, but Matveyev and other people who really developed the system of periodizations. We wouldn't have it. They were developing champions before drugs became prominent, especially in weightlifting. It wouldn't shock me at all if Yuri Vlasov never did the steroid. And probably Leonid Jabotinsky either. But if they did, okay, they trained for probably 5 years. They probably achieved the master sport level or higher before they started taking. But it is the system of training. We're taking that system, the better coaches in the U.S., and having a quality versus quantity mindset, which is what Cheryl Hayward did. She trained probably 4 times a week her entire career, won Olympic medals, won world championship medals, won junior world championships, set world records. CJ Cummings, same thing. It's quality versus quantity with a system of manipulating intensity, knowing when to push it, when to push the lifts, when to back off, and push squats and to push accessories and other things. And we wouldn't know what we know without it. You just say it's drugs.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten rid of doping.
Nope.
Gotten rid of pro sports, but we're becoming very competitive. Hampton Boris, Katie Kilroy on the men's side. Of course, Olivia Reeves, Sophie Shaft, Miranda Ulrich, Ella Nicholson. We have the strongest team I think we've ever had, and I hope they all stay healthy and train intelligently. But when coaches take their time and develop structure and develop the athlete without, okay, we got to clean and jerk or squat this by this time. No, let's just train. Let's see where we are in 2 or 3 years, and then let's start pushing it when it's okay to push it. Let's not train to the pain all the time.
I think that's the big lesson that I've learned and taken away from that Soviet style is you're not going like the max out every Friday. We've talked about this. Like, we're not throwing it down, or even we talked the West Side. Like, I've tried the West Side model and you just get beat down. Like,
it was very clear that his system didn't work with our house. And I think they did have a group of people that were drug free, at least for a period of time, but I don't think it lasted, or the training was very different. But yeah, he was in the documentary Bigger, Faster that Chris Bell does. He says it there. He said in other interviews his system was very reliant on drugs, but
And he took a lot from the Russians, right? He translated Russian manuals and kind of made his own version of conjugate.
Since Bud Charniga passed away, which was around the time that Ponce passed away, Bud could read Russian, speak Russian, and he translated all those works. Now I think Westside is the one to carry the torch, and they're continuing to sell those books. There's still a lot of Americans training in ways I don't understand. American weightlifters training in ways I just don't understand what they do, or why they're doing it, or if they'll be walking in 5 years. I just don't.
Yeah, it's almost curious. Like, are they trying to find their own model that works? Because the Russians studied this. We know the model works, and if you follow the parameters, it's just, to me, it seems, why are you're trying to find a new way to hack the system? And now some of it might work quickly, but then what's the longevity? Like we talk, you see a lot of these young kids burning out, or like they can't hack it for longevity because they're going hard at a young age. And not even in Olympic lifting, I see it in the sports that I work with too, is 13, 14, 15, they're all in. Hey, you have time to develop for Olympic cycles. There's no need to just try to do everything right now to risk years of potential competitiveness.
I don't care what anyone clean and jerks at 15 or 16 years old. I care more about what you're going to potentially clean and jerk in your athletic prime. And that should be the focus. If someone has lofty ambitions for weightlifting or whatever sport, if you can clean and jerk 400 pounds as a young teen, okay, great. But were you pushed too hard too soon? Are you done by the time you're 20? And most of the time, if not every time, they are. Where is the fire? Take your time. Okay, and if you're a coach where people move across the country to be coached by you and represent your team, and all you do is hurt them, and not just one or two incidences, but it's pretty frequent, I don't care who the successes are. I don't care. I wouldn't have a lot of nice things to say about people who you earn their trust, and then you violate that trust by training them in such a way that's not conducive for them. As a coach, you have to find what works for them. Well, Lydia Reeves was lifting phenomenal weights, training 3 times a week. And then she went to 4 sometime before the Olympics in 2024, maybe 6 months or something like that. He went to 4 times a week, but obviously she's going to have a tougher fight this quad with the North Korean and the Chinese entrants that are in her weight class now. With the women's 77, she's going to have a tougher time. But I think she's up for the task, and she can do it. Or she can stay healthy and keep improving. And that's what she needs to do. But never has there been an American lifter in the modern era that scared or intimidated the communist countries much they didn't enter a participant.
Yeah.
That's good. Our country, just in weightlifting, the coaches who have gone to seminars by international coaches, Alexei Charati, Klokoff, Liu Zhaozhang was doing them some years ago, either going overseas or going to the seminars here. They are the ones that are producing really good athletes. Not solely. You have coaches like Ray Jones, who's one of the best coaches in the world. And he's been all over the world. He's learned things here and there, but he produced a 73 kilo male junior lifter in C.J. Cummings that snatched 155 and clean and jerked 193. As a drug-free 73, front squatting 255 kilos as much as Shi Jian ever front squatted, and CJ's drug-free. Oh, how do I know he's drug-free? Does anybody really know how drugs work and how much they cost? If you're going to be developed on drugs over a period of time, let's say like Lillian was, you can't just be on testosterone. You have to be on human growth hormone, EPO, and probably cortisol. You have to be on all those so you don't die. Your muscles don't become strong. The connective tissue becomes weak. That's where human growth comes in to strengthen your connective tissue. And then to feed this athlete with consistent oxygen, EPO, and other things. Does anyone know how much this costs? If you're in a country that doesn't have a state-sponsored doping program, you're not affording any of it.
Yeah.
Or most of it. Testosterone isn't that expensive by itself, but if all you do is take it by itself, then you're going to blow me out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You read books about people who went on their own and did cycles, and they'll write in the book like, hey, it didn't end well.
After communism fell, and there were former Soviet Republic countries who were eager to produce athletes and get funding from their governments. My dad has been to Ukraine and Belarus and Russia several times each. And shortly after communism fell, and their economies were terrible, but they were in the mix of trying to provide for athletes who were still medal threats. And did they start doping lifters younger? Yeah. So out of necessity for their sports programs and stuff. But in their way of thinking, they know what's legal and what's not legal. But in their mind, they don't understand why steroids are banned. Like anything that can help you recover and get better is a good thing. It's just like taking creatine and protein powder that understand why they're banned. They think it's ridiculous.
But it's one of those things that even in the US, I feel like that recovery talk is really hard. Like we said at the beginning with the nutrition, like we have it in our mindsets, like, oh, you have to be low fat, you have to eat chicken and veggies and this amount of carbs. I think that does play a role in any athlete development here, not understanding like the recoverability of nutrition. And I've done diets where it's low fat, and man, it sucks. I've also done diets where it's higher fat and you feel better. And you also see the blood work, you see your HDL cholesterols go up in a good way.
Cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. I hate to break it.
Oh, I know.
There's many people in the U.S. and other doctors I talk to who are older, who every doctor, whether they're a physician or surgeon or whatever, you get 3 hours of nutrition in your medicals. Now, the younger doctors I worked with who graduated from medical school in the last 5 years, they know cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. But then they also know more about what the functions of cholesterol are. It causes immune system function. Your immune system doesn't really function well with low cholesterol. It is directly responsible for the production of testosterone. It is responsible for repairing damaged tissue. You wouldn't blame firemen for starting the fire. They're there to put the fire out. That's what cholesterol, if someone has high cholesterol in their major arteries, you have a terrible diet. You either smoke or drink a liter of whiskey a day, and you're eating junk food at the rate that your body can't repair. Your brain's going to tell those areas to have more cholesterol, to raise their cholesterol levels, that they can repair your damaged artery walls. And for some people, unfortunately, the cholesterol hardens and causes blockage, and that's it. It's not the cholesterol that causes you to die, it's the inflammation. Right. But cholesterol is very important.
And that's one thing that's starting to change. We're starting to get that because even the young athletes that I work with, they're petrified of eating protein, putting on lean muscle mass and cholesterol. It's backwards, but that's kind of the realm that the US is starting to push. Oh, you can't have too high protein, you can't all this, but it's like from the athlete standpoint, or just general pop looking to recover and have good hormones and stuff. You got to get with it.
I've coached quite a few people from Europe, from Sweden, from Germany, Belgium, and I know quite a few people in Russia. There's a coach named Timur Solidnikov I talk to quite a bit. He speaks pretty good English. We can have a conversation, but if you look at the countries that have the highest fats in their diet, they have the longest lives. Right? I used to coach this guy named Daniel who has a gym in Stockholm. And you know what to eat in the morning? Eggs and bacon.
Right.
And butter. Cooked in a lot of butter. And the diet advice, the nutrition advice I give to athletes and lifters who, especially if they're college and they eat a lot of crap like Kraft mac and cheese and a lot of
Uh-huh.
just processed crap. I'm like, you need to eat one ingredient foods. You need to eat real food. Eggs, bacon, butter, beef, lamb, chicken, fish, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, potatoes, rice, buckwheat, feta cheese, kefir. You need to consume real food in higher quantities of them, especially in the morning. And they go, that's it? I go, yeah. You need more fat and protein in the morning. You need more than just a bowl of cereal. You need a few eggs in there, and you need some potatoes or rice, but you need to up the fat there a little bit. You need to start doing that. We'll start with just adding a few eggs to breakfast. And once that's dialed in, it may be time, if they climb the ladder and get better, it may be time to get a nutritionist to look at them and go, okay, this athlete's a freak, and we need to start really looking at micros and macros and stuff and giving it more nutrition that way. It's really not. If you look at the videos of what the major superfoods were for Soviet athletes, it's kefir, it's a cheese that I won't even try and pronounce, but it's mostly related to feta cheese.
Oh.
And I know that Bulgarians, Russians, Romanians, Hungarians ate feta cheese and salami like you wouldn't believe. I did. And eggs in the morning, fatty meat as well. And Vasily Alexiev commonly had at least 12 eggs for breakfast, along with caviar and beef tongue or beefsteak. And this is in his biography, The World's Strongest Man. He's sitting down. He's slow to eat at first. He empties a mug of beer. Then he just starts eating caviar. Then he starts eating eggs. And he's forcing himself to eat because he knows he won't be able to train and lift the volume he needs to improve.
And that's the thing. You see some of these lifters when they're eating, it's a lot. It's a lot of food, but it's good quality food. It's not like you say Kraft mac and cheese or unhealthy fats. We're not saying, hey, go eat McDonald's and get a bunch of fat that way. It's like, that's not going to work. People hear that and they panic, and they also don't realize how much, like from a caloric standpoint, that athletes go through. You posted something, I think it was from one of the manuals, about like even the lifters, of how much that they're going through training sessions, even athletes with conditioning and all that stuff. Like they're burning through a mass amount of calories.
Weightlifting is some of the most intense training. It's not the most intense, but if you really want to look at expenditure of energy, weightlifting, judo, grappling, martial arts, those are at the top. Swimming as well. Have you ever seen one of the videos, or several? There's one by Weightlifting House, and there's one completely in Bulgarian of Carlo Nassar's diet. What he eats.
Crazy.
But
that's insane.
Grams. And this is when he was 88, before he went up to the 90s.
Who's got to be eating more?
Like, we don't know what the tuna or veal meatballs are made with, what we don't know, but he's eating 10 to 12 eggs in the morning. He's eating steak and sausage and more chicken with 2 servings of potatoes. At night, he's eating 5 or 6 times a day.
No.
And the guy's a machine.
He is. But that's,
again, if people who are using drugs still make it extremely important to have their nutrition dialed in, their sleep dialed in, their training times dialed in, and how much more important should it be for people not to drugs?
that's right.
We've covered a lot of ground. I think to maybe circle back to one of the earlier things we were discussing, for example, when I was talking about what they focus on overseas and more Eastern Europe, and to a degree even Asia, even China, they focus on how forceful the quads extend and how much force they can produce. And we were talking about, okay, here largely in the U.S., we were using the top-down method. There, what they do is they find what works. They find what each individual athlete responds to and clicks with. If they teach everyone how to properly address the blur, how to set up, how to do liftoff, and it's not clicking with some people, then they'll go to blocks or they'll go to the hang. But they have 37, 38 exercises in total of variations they have. and they whittle them down and find what each individual athlete responds to. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of program, whereas the USA weightlifting manuals are getting better, but with the top-down method, if somebody wanted to go to a weightlifting seminar done by this lifter, and this lifter is literally regurgitating the same thing in the USA weightlifting manuals, have, I want my money back.
Yep.
Or I teach the top-down method, and I teach the top-down method. Again, it's a way to start, but weightlifting's from the ground up, and that's where I prefer to start. That's where we prefer to start. And on YouTube, in 2014, the entire Russian national team gathers to train, the men's team, with a few of the women because they have the same coach. Their coach is coaching on the men's side. All of them have their individual coaches. There's Oleg Chen, a famous 62, 69 kilo lifter. There's Alexei Lovchev before he got popped. There's a couple of big supers like Chingiz, if you remember that hilarious guy. He was like 200 kilos. But they've got, after a bunch of different lifters, Artem Akulov, and none of them are training the same way. Oleg Chen, for example, starts doing snatches from blocks. And he starts warming up with 50 kilos, and his coach walks over to him and shakes his head and immediately starts giving him feedback on what to do right. And he wasn't positioned the bar to his hips. The coach came over, gave an earful, and then he worked up to doing like triples with 160 from blocks. He did doubles until he got to his work sets. Alexei Lovchev did muscle snatches and overhead squats, and then some snatch thrusters. Every single person was training very differently to what their strength and weaknesses were and how their coaches developed it. It's a good mix of things. It's weird and odd that communism created a system of training that relied on creative thought, creativity in the art of coaching. We start here, we want these things done, we want these principles to be taught, but here is a list of, here are ways to get everybody that you coach responding. Because if I insist that everybody respond to one or two variants and they don't get it, they're not reacting the way I want, and I insist we're going to do it this way until you get it, you could waste months.
Yeah.
That's what I like about it.
Well, even when coaching me, like I've done so many different of the 38 different variations of hang and some things that I don't do anymore, like drop snatches. And I've always like, how do you pick which ones for which? Or I'd be like, oh, I have to do all variations to work on a skill. But now through that lens, you're learning like, oh, you're picking things that are going to make me get good at what I need to and work on the areas that I need to improve without throwing a bunch of different stuff at me.
And I think you know how I feel about drop snatches.
I know. I have permanently taken them out of my coaching repertoire after you explained it to me. But for the audience, like for drop snatches, because I used to do them, and my coach in college when I was going through an exercise science program would teach them, for us, why don't we do drop snatches?
Because in a drop snatch, there is no vertical force applied into the. You're completely standing still, and then you just drop. Nobody can snatch any kind of weight that's not moving or on the rise by the force you generate. We don't receive snatches. We don't receive 200 kilo snatches on a bar that's not moving. And it's going to be move one of two ways. It's going to go up or down. That's why I prefer the snatch balance, where some people teach a very quick calf raise or a very little leg drive and a calf raise, but in some way, shape, or form, you implement vertical force to get the bar moving up off your shoulders, with which to mimic the phase in which you pull the bar with the degree of amplitude and altitude you need. Now you need to get underneath it. You need to squat under and get low while it's rising. Okay? You can't snatch much of anything. You can't snatch a barbell that's not moving vertically up through the force you generate with your legs.
Yeah. It's used. I still see it online. I see certain coaches coaching it. It's like, to me now, it's a cool technique to just be good at a skill for getting under a bar fast. But even when a skill of just that's itself as a drop snatch, it's not a skill for the actual snatch. You're just, hey, you can move under a bar and catch it.
There's no transfer. Nobody can rapidly descend under a barbell that's motionless and just completely still. Moving up.
And it's really reframed the leg drive with the quads, really remaps everything from a coaching standpoint. Because once you understand that, you go, oh, this is the important part of it. If it takes that away, then what is the athlete doing neuromuscularly that is going to be uncoordinated eventually? Because I still see, and I work with some coaches that they teach the hip hinge power snatch and clean, and you can visually see when the athlete goes to put more weight on, they're not going to be able to manage it because that bar is getting away from it, and they're not in a position to produce force.
They're knocking the bar way out front, and it just keeps happening. Yeah.
But that's it. You've just modeled it in understanding more especially the programming, the not really working some 90, but not really working to one rep maxes every week. We're working, you said we're going to do a lot of volume, and man, I've gotten a ton of reps in between the 80 and 90% rep range, but it just builds resiliency.
We're developing technical consistency, technical efficiency, and we're building work capacity. And much of that, there might come a point, you're like, okay, let's put 200 on the bar. I want to snatch, and I'm tired of these runs. And you just feel great.
And it's getting that, because I can, like today, I could feel the leg drive. It's automatic. It's just there. Like you think about it, you feel it, but it's not like prior I would struggle to get that full leg drive. Now it's just, now I just expect, hey, this bar is coming fast because of my legs.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you want to take a very brief look at the Chinese system, which has changed a bit in the last 10, 15 years, but if you were to break down their system in 3 words, it will be close, fast, low. Keep the bar close to the body's longitudinal axis, produce force with your legs, which they do have certain words for that, but fast, produce force, and get low. Now they're teaching that if you want to add anything to it, it would be like close, fast, low, stable, or something like that. But they're teaching their lifters to receive the bar and lock it out higher and higher before you reach the lowest point you're going to reach in the squat under of a snatcher clean. And some of the lifters, it looks like they could power snatch it. They snap it to arm's length quick, and then they squat down and come back up. And I'm like, wow. But very, very similar to what the Russians would, and the old Soviet system would teach. And it's not rocket science. If they train their men and women very differently, but Chinese are built like tanks. I don't see Chinese lifters blowing elbows out of line. It's over.
I think that kind of wraps us up. Anything else?
Right.
Where can people find you for coaching, for blogs? You go check out the blogs that you're going to get a good insight of the Russian style, the squat mechanics, I won't say pulling, but like producing force through the legs, through the quads. Where can people find you?
My website, weightlifting.com. I largely built that myself, and I'm dyslexic as hell. Still there's I go back and edit it and fix misspelled words, and I'm dyslexic, but I built that myself, and soon I'm looking to get a professional site done. I'm on Instagram, Palmetto_weightlifting, and I'm sitting here on the Sorinex building. I was training myself right before we hopped on. And I did some coaching here today. I'm in the conference room here. But I'm out of weightlifting. I have a YouTube page as well where people can see the athletes who are not weightlifters that I've coached, like when Christian squatted 705 at 17 at the Summer Strong a couple of years, not built for weightlifting, and some of the other athletes who lifted some big lifts here. Yeah, YouTube, Instagram, and my website.
Yeah, that's one thing you posted recently. I think for him, you didn't squat him over 5 reps.
He never squatted more than 5 reps, so ultimately he made the most progress squatting once every 10 days.
That's crazy. It puts in perspective because people ask me, like, I don't squat high reps ever anymore. Like, I gave that up. Maybe if I do Squattober, but I've given up like anything over maybe 5 reps for a long time. And for me, there's no need. Like, I can get it accessory work somewhere else, but I don't need to grind out sets of 8. And I love it.
Squatting that much, and really anything over 5 reps starts to get body
Yeah.
going. That's sort of like, if you look at a multi-year system of training, there's no more than 5 reps there. Coach King never had people do more than 5 reps. Small church did not have people doing 5 reps. Paul Coffey. I've learned from these 3 coaches. Paul Coffey, most of them are going to be, if they're not now, they're going to be in the International Weightlifting Hall of Fame. Paul Coffey is. Paul Coffey's in his 80s, and he's still coaching. And if you're doing sets of 8 and sets of 10, you're just targeting the floor, which fibers the body of the legs. And okay, there could be your extreme ectomorphic body type that just needs more reps. Okay. But that would be a rare exception. But I don't get consistent sets of 10. If you do that, you might as well be training for Mr. Weapy.
Yeah, it very goes back to the NSCA linear periodization of model. Oh, you got to always start someone 10 and 8 and 6. It's like there's a lot of coaches that are still very married to that in different phases. Okay, maybe if they're 5 or 8 and we're doing body weight squats and just building, but other than that, once you start moving to older athletes, I don't really feel a need to be like, hey, we're going to do sets of 10 and then whittle down.
The strength coach at a local high school here, it was a ski school called Ben Lippin, but not much of a weight room. And I was there roughly 3.5 years before I moved to Savannah to coach there. We never did more than 5 reps in the back squat or the front squat. We did various lunges where we did more reps. We did sets of 6 to 8, and we did power cleans and things like that. And one year, I took 6 to 8 athletes to the Skiza Strength and Speed competition, and we won every event. The vertical, the shuttle, the squat, obviously the bench press, the deadlift, the power clean. And then several of them went to the overall state strength and state meet and won. And people were going, where are these guys coming from? They just didn't know what was going on. And there was one player from Bidlip, and I didn't have that long to work with him. His name was Sam Congato. And if you YouTube him, you could see him running touchdowns for the Green Bay Packers, for the St. Louis Rams. He was one of the most freakish I've ever seen or worked with him, my wife.
Love it. All right, man. I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to, of course.
Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie here from Think Fitness Life. Our entire careers have been dedicated to fitness, particularly how the mind helps the body. We've been around gyms and nutrition strategies for 25 plus years collectively, and nothing harms or helps better than your own mind, untrained or trained. Pushing beyond your limits, overcoming whatever's thrown your way, and making the decision to show up day in and day out as a lifestyle takes more soul than sand. And what I mean by that is when you can get your mindset and heart leading you consistently in the direction of your goals and dreams, well, it's just a matter of time before you have the performance, physique, or quality of life you're yearning for. See, your thoughts will stem from your beliefs, which will then lead you to action, which develop into your behavior and ultimately lead you to results. It's really that simple. Our process takes time and it takes open communication. It's amazing what pops up along the fitness journey to betterment, and we can be there every step of the way. To learn more or apply for coaching, visit www.thinkfitnesslife.com. Start recreating your life today.